Hey everyone, I am grateful for the opportunity to talk with you parents a little bit today about talking about God at home as part of what we're doing with Kids Club Live this year in teaching our children to talk about Jesus to anyone and everyone, particularly those of their friends who don't know Jesus. And as with most things, learning to talk about Jesus starts at home. And the story that I want to draw your attention to is maybe a familiar one if you know the scriptures well, but we're going to draw attention to a detail that you might not really have thought about much before. It's a story in 2 Kings chapter 5 about Naaman, the Aramean general. So he's a Syrian general in a non-Israelite army. He's a pagan. He's a worshiper of other gods and goddesses. And he's a pretty good, effective general. He was beloved by the king. But one day he came down with leprosy, with a skin disease that he needed something to be done about. And nobody in his land was able to do anything. But it just so happened that in his home there was a servant girl who was an Israelite, who had been taken from her home and was living in a foreign land. And in the story, she speaks up and says, well, my God can actually do something about this. And there are prophets in my land that you should go and see. And so Naaman talks with some of his advisors and decides to give it a shot. And so he goes to Israel and he approaches the king of Israel and says, I've been told that there's a God in Israel who can solve this problem of my leprosy. So my king has sent me to you. And the king of Israel is upset about this because he thinks that the king of Aram, the king of the Syrians, is trying to pick a fight. And so he says, I can't do anything about this, and your king knows it. He's trying to start a war. But then Elisha the prophet steps in and says, actually, our God can do something about this, and he has sent me to tell you what to do to be cured of your leprosy. All you need to do is to go to the Jordan River, which is a river in Israel, and you need to dip yourself in this river 7 times. And after you do this, you'll be healed. And Naaman doesn't like this. He's not very pleased with this answer because he expected some sort of, cool magic trick or a big impressive thing, and all of a sudden he'd be well. But he says, why would I dip myself in your dirty river? If that's all it takes, I got rivers back home. I could have swam in those if that's all that was needed to be cured of leprosy. And so he's frustrated. But his servants say, hey, if the prophet would have told you to do something crazy, you'd have done it. So just because it's simple doesn't mean it won't work. Give it a shot. What do you have to lose? And so he goes down to the Jordan River and he dips himself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing happens. 7 times. Boom, he's healed. And he immediately exclaims, I know now that there's a God in Israel. And he actually commits no longer to offer sacrifices to the other gods and goddesses, but he will only offer sacrifices to Yahweh, the God of Israel. And he takes this news back home with him and he continues to direct his attention and affection to the Lord. That's the story. Now, whenever they first asked me to talk about this story when it comes to talking about God at home, I read it and I was like, I have never thought about this like this before. But we want to draw your attention to the servant girl who, notice, she's in a foreign land that is hostile to her faith, and yet she spoke up about God. And she didn't set out to have some strategy for evangelizing them, nothing wrong with that. But for her, it was just this automatic impulse. Oh, there's a problem, my God can solve it. And when I think about this, that's what I want for my children. I want them to be able to talk about their faith in a context that may be hostile to their faith, in a foreign land. And I want them to do so automatically. How do we raise children to do that? And the answer is, we talk about God at home. We don't know much about the servant girl, but we do know that she's an Israelite. And we do know that the primary prayer that the Israelites prayed is found in Deuteronomy 6. It's called the Shema. Maybe you've heard of it. It says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. You know that command. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Hear what happens next. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. She was prepared to talk about the Lord in a foreign land as a matter of habit because she was raised in a home that talked about the Lord. And that's our charge as dads and moms, as fathers and mothers, to talk about God to our children, to do so in planned ways. I think it's important for every family to have a time, whatever it looks like for you. And if you don't know how to do this, start somewhere where you open up the Word together and you engage God together. But it's also about those unplanned moments when maybe your child is confused and you give them words of wisdom from the scriptures. Maybe they're sad and you offer them words of encouragement from the scriptures. Maybe they're happy and you teach them words of gratitude from the scriptures. In each of these contexts, what we're doing is we're talking about God at home. Home is where we learn to speak, not just the language we speak, but the things we talk about. And of course, the most important part of this is us, is you. Because it's been said you teach what you know, but you reproduce what you are. That's going to be true in our homes as well. And the only way we can train up children who naturally talk about the God they know is if we're people who are pursuing the God we know. if we're seeking his face and spending time in his word and seeking the wisdom of his word so that we might share it for others. So let's be people of the word so that we might raise children of the word, and let's talk about God all the time and everywhere, starting at home.